Sleepers, breakouts, and busts right now for the NFC East on FFT Express. So, yeah, it was a couple months ago, maybe, we had to write our player outlooks.
Yes.
So Dan assigned us divisions, and he assigned himself the NFC East. Which is a huge surprise for all of you know Dan. So Dan's on the show to give us a sleeper, breakout, and bust in the NFC East, although I'm going to help out. So how about a sleeper?
For me, the sleeper is going to be Jaydon Blue. Really enjoyed watching his tape at Texas. I felt like he was a player who reminded me in some ways of a old school fantasy guy that you may remember from Cal, who played on the Detroit Lions. Do you think you can guess from Jaydon Blue's profile?
Javid Best?
Yes, Javid Best. A little bit of best in him. Not quite level of best. Best, if he never got the injuries, would have been an amazing NFL player and more in like the Chris Johnson light. This is not that, but he could easily, in my mind, be the best player in this Cowboys backfield from a talent standpoint and the most effective. And in my mind, he could actually take over a pretty big role right away. So he's my favorite sleeper in the division.
So, it's interesting because I'm starting to really think that Javonte Williams might be that guy, might be that sleeper.
I can't do it.
I know he's been so bad the last 2 years, but I kind of could buy the excuse. He had such a serious knee injury, and he says he's finally back to being healthy. And I feel very confident that he's going to get the first shot. So I went from a guy who was Javonte Williams is basically a nothing.
Yeah,
Javonte Williams might be the best sleeper in fantasy football.
He might be, if you're right. And what he said is true, that he finally feels back to his health. But I've heard that line from players thousands of times since I've started doing fantasy football. And what would you guess? There's no science behind this. We can't Aizer stat it, but what would you guess would be the percentage rate of when players say they finally feel healthier, they finally feel themselves? Does it actually come out playing true? You'd say it's probably under 60%, right?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. That's the thing, but it's 2 years now, right? So this is what happened with Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin had a great bounce back season 2 years removed from his ACL injury, and he said that it took him a long time.
Godwin was a great player before the injury. I'm not sure Javonte Williams ever was a great NFL player before the injury.
Well, he only had a few games at the end of his rookie season and a few at the beginning of his second season, so we don't know. But I do think Javonte Williams or Jaydon Blue, I think the Cowboys are an interesting team. Is their starting running back? We don't know who it is. They're probably going to be a good offense. They usually are. There's if a guy can take over, just look what happened with Rico Dowdle. He was a very valuable player second half. So
exactly.
Let's keep an eye on this because you don't have to spend a top 100 pick on a Cowboys running back. You may not even have to spend a top 120 pick on a Cowboys running back. A breakout for you. You want me to do the breakout?
You could hit the breakout. I have a couple. Go for it.
I'm going to stick with the Cowboys. I'm going to go George Pickens. I don't think he's ever finished higher than 36 per game in PPR. And I think being the number 2 receiver on a good passing offense will be better than being the number 1 receiver on a subpar, I won't say bad, but a subpar passing offense. And, he was in a pretty good stretch with Russell Wilson. He was only the number 30 wide receiver per game with Wilson, but in that was 8 games. The first 6 games of that stretch, George Pickens was the number 14 wide receiver per game. Then he missed 3 games with an injury, and he came back, and he was absolutely terrible against Kansas City and Cincinnati. He had 4 catches for 50 yards in the last 2 games of the year. But he was actually a pretty consistent player in his first 6 games with Russell Wilson, and that was with really bad touchdown luck. So I think we saw a very brief stretch of him being a number 1 receiver and being a top 15 wide receiver. I don't expect that, but I think top 30 is good. A good safe kind of floor for I wouldn't say floor, safe expectation for George Pickens. Extremely talented guy, and I don't expect a ton of targets or catches. I sort of expect a light version of Jamison Williams. Big play potential on an offense that's not as good as Detroit, but good. And I like him beginning in maybe the 6th round. I'd love him in the 7th round.
Okay. I like that value. I think I can get on board with that. Dallas is going to be, like you said, one of the higher scoring offenses. Their offensive line is still trending up, and they continue to invest in it with another 1st-round pick. So I'm in on that.
All right. Unfortunately,
yes,
I want to check his ADP.
Okay.
Because he's a 5th-round pick on so he's a 5th-round pick on Fantasy Pros, but he is a 6th-round pick on CBS. And it's just a huge difference for me. All right, we're going to take a break and talk about a bust in the NFC East after this. Back here on Fantasy Football Today Express. So sleepers, we're looking at the Cowboys running backs. Breakout, I'm looking at George Pickens, and Dan can get on board, which is good. How about a bust?
For me, it's Brian Robinson Jr. I went over this on a few shows ago, maybe a month or two ago, but really what it comes down to with Brian Robinson Jr. averaged under 2 targets per game, 1.71. I don't see that taking any kind of jump, if anything, maybe to 2 to 3. So there's no involvement in the pass game whatsoever. And it comes down to, with Robinson, A, can this offense be as successful as it was last year? Because it was wildly efficient, with a year of defensive coordinators having a film on the scheme to take away. We saw what happened with CJ Stroud when teams got film. This is what happens with a lot of rookie quarterbacks going from year 1 to year 2. People expect a big jump from year 1 to year 2 with quarterbacks. It oftentimes is the opposite. Year 3 is usually when that real jump happens. So I'm a little worried about that offense, and I'm worried about, if that offense isn't what it was, what is Brian Robinson for us? He's a guy who relied on touchdowns in my mind. And that's just not a player I would want to invest in with no receiving profile, because I mostly play in PPR leagues.
Yeah, obviously his value changes a lot in non-PPR. Yeah. Half PPR, he's still kind of a liability. Full PPR, he's risky. I agree with your sentiment about Brian Robinson Jr. He is going to have to score touchdowns. I just think he will. And if you look at him last year on a per game basis, he was running back 21 in non-PPR and 30 in full PPR. But he left 2 games early. One of them with an injury. One of them was week 18. You remove those 2 games and he's top 24 running back. And guess where he's going in Fantasy Pros ADP? He's RB 30. So I almost feel like I agree with you. There's not a lot to get excited about here. There's not a league winning potential. There's not big upside. Like, for example, if you're choosing between Brian Robinson Jr. and Cooper Kupp, who's 2 picks later, and you don't care about the position, I'd go with Cooper Kupp. But getting drafted as RB30, I actually like that value a lot, because I don't really think he can do much worse than that. I don't think there's competition that's taking him off the field, basically. So he'll be fine. He won't be great. I see your point. I just feel like he's being drafted almost as a bust.
Yeah, that's fair. It's not like you have to make a huge investment.
All right, we haven't talked about any Eagles. You think Saquon Barkley is going to be a bust?
No, I'm on the Saquon Barkley train. He's my RB1 overall, so no.
Okay, you were thinking about making Tyrone Tracy a breakout call. How do you see the Giants back right now?
The thing is, for a while I wasn't on that train, Adam, and then I went back over the last couple of weeks, really the last week, and watched a ton of Tyrone Tracy, all 22. I was just so impressed with the way that he paces his runs, with his vision, with the subtle cuts he uses, great space. I think going back through some Dable data, he really has leaned on one back and tried to, even last year when Tracy got the hot hand. So I think Tracy will actually be that one. There's been a lot of expectation it'll be just like a full split with him and Scadaboo, or like maybe like a 64 or 60 or 50-40-10 with Singletary. I think it will be more Tracy. So I'm willing to bet on the possible breakout there.
All right, that's it for Fantasy Football Today Express. Hope everybody has an awesome 4th of July weekend, and we're back on Monday on Fantasy Football Today. See ya.